welcome everyone. Welcome to the Total Truth Show. And here on the Total Truth Show, we want to help you break free from the lies and propaganda of the mainstream media. All the disinformation and misinformation, we want to help you blast through all of that. And my name is Ken Kleinberg, coming to you all the way from the USA, San Diego, California.
And I'm Aldwyn Altuney, known as the Media Queen from the Gold Coast in Australia.
There is a great awakening happening in the world right now, and you're going to want to come along for the ride.
A lot of lies are coming to the surface. There's a lot of awakening happening, and as this awakening is happening, people realize they've been deceived for years. They've been lied to for years around all sorts of things. A lot of people have been blind to what has been going on in the world, and now they're starting to see. They're starting to see things in a different light.
Through our show, we want to raise global consciousness to quantum critical mass. And we don't want you just to accept the things that we're saying. That goes for our guests as well. We want you to do the research for yourself. Get out there and start questioning things. Start looking things up. Do the research. We want to pave the way for a new awakened world. And we want you to come along for the ride. So with that, let's get started, you guys. Let's dive into today's episode. Once again, welcome.
Yes, welcome to Total Truth Show, episode 92, The Truth About Spirituality. Welcome on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X, wherever you're joining us right now. Welcome. We can't wait to share what we have in store today. My amazing co-host, of course, Ken Kleinberg. How are you today, Ken?
I am doing absolutely wonderful. And how about you?
Fantastic. Thank you. Couldn't be better.
I like your hairpiece, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much. I thought I'd be a little bit different today. It is a new year, of course, 2025, time to do things a little bit differently. And our special guest today, Ian Millar. Now, he's an author, a Bible teacher, evangelist, a missions and ministry leader. He calls himself a troublemaker and a roughneck Christian as well. He is from Colorado Springs, however, currently in Tennessee. Welcome, Ian.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be on the show. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to be a joint member here with you on your panel.
Well, it's great to have you here. And I must ask, what are you doing in Tennessee currently?
We're on kind of a pilgrimage, my wife and I. We have been, we left Colorado Springs, almost a decade ago, after living there for 21 years. And it was really an altitude health issue for my wife. But the long story short is that we began looking for where we would settle along the coasts of America. I'm from the West Coast originally, so we went west. We discovered there are actually 4 coasts in America, not 3. And so we've lived on all 4 of those coasts at some point. The 4th coast, not many people know about, is the St. Lawrence Waterway, which is north of the state of New York and Vermont. And it's basically the Canadian border along quite a long stretch of it, and they call it the 4th coast. It's quite an interesting place, definitely worth visiting, but don't bother going anytime other than summer because it's completely frozen the rest of the year.
Wow.
And it does amaze me that there have been fires going on in California, and I'm sending love out to all those who have been affected by the fires around California and all the animals as well. Lots of animals have died, or it's been absolutely horrible. And it amazes me that this happens in the middle of winter over there, and that there's a lot around this, as in, water reserves emptied and funding cut and all sorts of things. So do your research into what's going on with the fires. But
I can tell you firsthand, those fires, they're not they're not natural. They are arson. They're on purpose.
Yeah. Well, and they're finally catching some of the people involved, but they've definitely been set. But it's predictable because at this time of year in California, they often get what they call the Santa Ana winds, which is a strong, winds that just keep going from onshore out to the ocean, and they can get quite fierce at times. So it's dry. It's their dry season right now, and they get high winds. So it's actually fairly predictable if you pay attention. But the government obviously out there isn't paying attention. Well, I'll just leave it at that. There could be a more nefarious reason why, but anyway.
Oh, I can get into that for sure, because
Yes.
I definitely believe in weather modification. I believe they've been playing with it, and yeah, it's just there's too many things that are just lining up and pointing in the direction that these are all designed. So I do also find it interesting that the elites, their houses are the ones that are burning down with all the evidence
Right.
and all the things. So yeah, there's that. So
Well, it's also very similar. I've had a number of people talk to me about how similar it is to the Hawaiian fires from, what was that, 18 months ago?
Maui, yes, it's
Yeah.
actually the exact same playbook.
Yeah. So, I'm just going to say that there are certain people in government and in power who believe that the government should own all the property and that individual property rights shouldn't exist. And of course, they're going to attack the people who have the largest spread of property when they attack that. So I think that's what's going on personally. So.
So do your own research, guys, with everything we're sharing here. If it sounds a bit out there, well, maybe it is, or maybe it isn't, right? What do you believe to be true that maybe isn't? And this is where doing your own research on alternative truth platforms. That's something Trump is standing for, as well as freedom of speech, thank goodness. And, minimizing all the fake news, which we're seeing. We've seen a lot of fake news through mainstream media over the years, and also through the censorship we've seen even on Facebook and to this day on YouTube, quite heavy striking of content, etc., where it goes against certain agendas. So always question everything. Now, today's going to be an interesting one because we're going to chat about spirituality. Now, a lot of people say don't talk about politics, sex, or religion, and we'll probably talk about all three in this show here today. So we started a little bit on politics, and religion, spirituality, of course, is a big one here. Now, when we say spirituality, I know you are a Christian, Ian, and in fact, we all are Christians here, and I know that there's a lot of sort of negativity around sort of Bible bashes and around, some people get a bit extreme with whatever sort of religion or whatever your spiritual belief. Sometimes people get a bit full on with it, and they're sort of like, well, if you're not part of this religion or part of this, don't have the same belief that, you're going to rot in hell kind of thing. And, we've seen this across different religions, different beliefs, etc. So what are your thoughts, firstly, on spirituality versus religion?
That's interesting because I have a long journey in spirituality and religion before I became a Christian. So that journey started very young for me. But there is a difference. I'm not a proponent of religion at all, although I do believe the Bible is true, and I do believe that Jesus is who he says he is. But I'm not a proponent of religion. In fact, I would say that Jesus is probably the least religious person in the history of the world, because he really didn't believe that religion could solve anything. If you look at everything he taught, what he did was he brought people to an awareness of God, and he sought to have people understand that they should have a relationship with God. So that's really where when I discovered that was a huge awakening for me, because I'd been trying to figure out, spirituality apart from religion. I'd been raised in religion, but trying to get away from that. And, for me to find out, well, there actually is a God was surprising, because I didn't really believe until after I looked into all kinds of other alternate ideas of, spirituality and religion. So.
So for those who maybe are a bit confused on what the two are, let's just go right back to basics.
Sure. Yeah.
Religion versus spirituality. What's the distinction?
Well, that's a great question, because there's a lot of blurred lines across, both, right? There's a lot of things that don't claim to be religious but are, and there's a lot of things that people would say is religious that aren't. But really, religion, in my understanding, is man's structure, and I say man as mankind, trying to structure something to make ourselves better so that we can be acceptable to God or whatever spiritual realm that we believe in, right? And so the idea is self-improvement to appeal to the God or gods that you believe in. And so that's really where religion comes in there's some value to that, right? Self-improvement is important. I think, one of the things that you do find with a lot of religious movements is they're very strong on education. They're very strong on disciplines and all sorts of things. The problem is is that when we try to do that on our own without a truly spiritual experience, it falls short and it leaves us emptier than we started with. And that's where I found myself. Now, spirituality is an acknowledgement that we are basically living in a truly miraculous world. And there's more to the world than what we see. There's a spiritual dimension well beyond what can be, seen, tasted, touched, felt, and heard. And we all, I think most people do, if not all people, understand that there is a deeper realm. Science is now trying to say, well, there's another universe that our current universe came from. So that's another way of saying there's a spiritual realm that we can't taste, touch, or see. But ultimately, spirituality is accepting and acknowledging that there is a dimension of ourselves that is greater than what is the physical realm. Now, the problem is that there is not just a benign spiritual realm, but there is actually an evil spiritual realm. And so a lot of people get caught up in spirituality ideas, and they don't realize that they're actually playing right into, a deceptive realm where they can be taken captive. And that's where I believe it's important to really understand the source of all spirit, if you would.
Yeah, I love that. What are your thoughts, Ken?
My thoughts on that, they definitely are not. Ian, you did such a good job with that. I'm just like, how do I follow that? But so my thoughts are, I kind of want to touch on, the relationship part of things as well. So like Ian already, said, religion versus relationship. Now, I've grown up with a relationship with Christ. And I have also experienced the religion part of that, which is, rules and, all that stuff and working your way to heaven, kind of like a list of things to do, self-improvement. That's, you go to church, you hear a sermon, the pastor speaks, and then you've got a list of things to do, a list of things to improve on. That's religion. That is not Christianity. That's not what Christianity is. Christianity is the opposite of religion. In fact, Christianity is the one religion, or the one, I don't even want to say religion, it's the one belief system that has a savior that came down, put aside his God powers, experienced everything human that human has to offer, including temptations and struggles and pains.
Mm.
And then took on sin for himself to pay that price for us, to bridge the gap between man and God, because you've got a holy God and you've got sinful man, right? They don't go together. The bridge was Christ. And so now what you get to do is, so he died for those sins, he died for your sins, and then to make it even more powerful, on the third day he rose again, which means he is now the eternal sacrifice for sin, past, present, and future. That is more like a relationship, because now you've taken away earning your way to heaven. You're taking away the self-improvement. Now it becomes something centered on, well, how does the gospel apply to this? And what is God trying to teach me through this? What is he trying to show me about his character? Which is entirely a different way of looking at it. And it's an entirely different belief system than, okay, these are the things that I need to work on. I see I'm weak here, this, and so I need to work on this and this and this and this and this. And this is what's going to make me acceptable in God's eyes. So, I mean, that's kind of my take on that. And then you've got the spirituality part of it. Now, before I became a Christian, before God called me, and I'm using those words very specifically because I don't believe I found him. God found me. And because I don't think I had the ability to follow, to find him.
Mm.
The Bible is very clear on the state of man before the relationship with Christ. In essence, you really are on a straight path in the opposite direction, and you are heading that direction with full force, with all passion and might, because we are by nature self-centered. And so there's that. But before I became a Christian, I dabbled in witchcraft and different things like that, even some new agey stuff and different things. And it was after I became a Christian, after God called me, that the veil was taken off of my eyes. I didn't have anybody tell me that the things that I was doing was evil in nature and the power behind it was not a good power. It's like when I became a Christian, those scales were literally taken off my eyes, and I saw all of that for exactly what it was, and I saw who was exactly behind that. Now, in my Christian walk, I don't even think you knew about this, Ian. I haven't even told you this, but
no, you hadn't. Yeah.
Through my own Christian walk in the beginning years, I did experience legitimate demonic oppression. As in, I had nights where I was held down to my bed. So they can't possess you because you're God's child and the Holy Spirit lives inside your heart. But they can attack you. They can physically attack you. They can put thoughts in your head. They can do all kinds of things. And I was attacked quite a few times, held down and pinned in my bed, a couple times unable to scream for help. I just had to pray inside my head and ask, in the name of Jesus Christ, with the power that he has, away from me, get out of this room, get out of my house and everything. Each and every time, of course, as soon as I prayed that in my head, I was delivered. But I'm going to tell you, this spiritual realm, oh, people, it is quite real.
It's very real. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of who's behind it.
Right.
And who's behind, all of that. So, I mean, you've got God and his angels and Christ and all the good sources that come from that. And then you've got the evil entities.
Yeah.
So anyhow, Ian, back over to you.
I find that interesting because I was prepared to talk about some of that from my own experience. But yeah, that's it's really fascinating you brought that up. And I don't know if this is a good point in the show or not to kind of go into, but when I was a young man, I was looking for answers. And I'd been raised in, my mom was somebody who'd walked away from religion. She'd been, raised in very strict Roman Catholic family, had, a comprehensive Catholic classical education. And she, for various reasons, by the time I was a small child, she had walked away from that. And yes, she got into spiritualism. And she got into, philosophy and just self-help things, she became a business person who was always looking to improve herself. And so I was sort of introduced to the idea that, the way you think can change your reality, that kind of thing. But by the time I was a teenager, I was fully into the rock and roll world. And I'll tell you a secret that most people don't know. Rock and roll is a religion. It is absolutely a religion.
I've heard that, actually.
Now, it's not a religion as we think of as a formal institution, but I mean, there are very much practices and, for lack of a better word, disciplines that are part of it. And of course, it's all very eclectic, but it is a dark religion. It's an occultic religion. Everything, if you look at it, rock and roll is entirely about the, what the Catholics would call the 7 deadly sins, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll. I mean, that's the whole culture and the ethos that I was in for a long time. And naturally, I, gravitated into drugs. I became an addict. I was very severely, into that. I got to the point where I was working with a friend of mine to be delivery guys for the drug dealers, right? Because you get a lot more access to drugs if you're doing deliveries. And so we were constantly on the move, doing cocaine deliveries. And it's possible to get very addicted to cocaine very quickly when you have a lot of regular access to it. And I became so addicted to it that at one point I actually was hospitalized for overdosing.
Wow.
My heart and my body were just shutting down from having, too much of it, that alcohol and everything else, but, praise God, I was delivered from that, but I didn't become a believer in any way at that point. I just was physically delivered and came back to life, so to speak. Right. But, what did change my life was one day when I was 18 years old. I was at work late at night, driving home early from work. The only time I ever got off work early from my job. And I wound up having a very spiritual experience, which I could not explain. And at that time, I was looking into the occult. I was looking into New Age. I was looking into Buddhism, all kinds of different things, trying to figure it out. I had a couple of friends that were sort of covertly into the occult who could do things like they were into astral travel. And what amazed me about them, I don't know if anybody knows about the stuff. You probably don't want to know about it because you'll get caught into it if you get started. But the point of astral travel is that you actually physically leave your body, or you have the ability to see things remotely that makes you feel like you've left your body. I'm
Yeah,
not sure which.
so I didn't actually get to the point to where I actually was able to experience astral projection.
Yeah.
But I think about a year before I became Christian, I was playing around with it. I was exploring that, and I was doing meditations and different things like that. So
I
yeah, I'm
did it.
familiar with that.
I was into transcendental meditation for a while, and I did do astral travel. I never did it deliberately. It was sort of accidentally experiencing it. But these two guys that I knew, they didn't know each other, but I knew them from different places. They both could do it deliberately. And that's when I began to realize, well, there's something more to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I got really caught into it. Well, this one night, I'm leaving work early. Again, I was unexpectedly traveling home from the job I had in the restaurant early that night. And I wound up going to the gas station to get gas. I decided I was going to go get into trouble, have some fun, whatever I could do to shake it up a little bit. When I went to the gas station, I deliberately left my radio on, playing Def Leppard really loud for everybody, because that's the kind of guy I was, like to share the music loudly with everyone wherever I went. And I made sure, I was very consciously making sure that I did not, mistakenly lock the doors on my car, because I didn't want to, with the keys in the ignition, not be able to get back in. So I pumped the gas, go in and paid. Back in those days, you had to go inside to pay, come back out after being in line for a minute. And I notice that the doors on my car are locked, and there's nobody near my car, but the doors on my car are locked. And of course, I got furious, got angry, shook my fist at God when I couldn't figure out who else to blame. And so I went in, tried to find a wire to get into the car, finally got myself into the car. It took me about 4 or 5 minutes. And I went blazing off to go back to my house. Now, where I worked and where I lived are on the opposite sides of a mountain. There's a tunnel going through the mountain. And as I'm headed toward the tunnel, 3 times I have this weird experience where I just have this very heavy sense of oppression. If I keep going, at that point in those days, I would speed most everywhere, but especially when I was mad. And I was mad because the door was locked. So I was speeding down the highway. And 3 times I had this desperate sense of, if I don't slow down, I'm going to die. And I couldn't figure out what that was. It was like something was trying to communicate to me. And the 3rd time, as I slowed down, I pull up to the tunnel, and a fireball blows out of the tunnel. I mean, like, the kind of thing you see on Hollywood pyrotechnics, a great big orange fireball. Wow. And cars backing out of the tunnel, and just sudden mayhem. Saw a person come out of the smoke after the fireball. And I got out of my car there, and I just stood there looking at that and did not know what to make of it. I was so shaken. I was just completely, shook up, unable to really decide what to do for several minutes. Part of me said I should go help people, but I was so terrified I didn't want to get near it. I was like, I could feel the heat of that flame, And so I finally backed down the highway, and I found my way home. Told my mom what had happened. She grabbed her camera. We went out and started taking pictures from the other side of the tunnel. And I wound up getting interviewed by a newspaper that night. But the thing that got me that I couldn't really shake was that there was something spiritual happening. First of all, the doors of my car were locked, and that didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't put that together. And then this sense that somehow this sense of dread was on me. If I didn't stop or slow down, I would die. And then a little while later, an even more crazy awareness was I wasn't even supposed to be coming home at that time. I was off work more than an hour and a half early. And so I kind of had this awareness that there's something going on in the spiritual realm, that somehow I was being projected to go forward into this situation unexpectedly, and something else was trying to prevent me from it. That kind of made me go a little bit off kilter for a while. And I'll tell you what, when you don't have a basis to really put together something crazy like that in your life, if you're already a drug addict, man, you start going crazy with the drugs. And I went much worse into drugs and alcohol at that point. So I was completely shaken by that. And it took me about, I'm going to say, I don't know, I guess it was about 4 years before I really came to the awareness that I needed to do something spiritually in my life. I needed to change something. It wasn't working what I was doing. And at that point, I'd met a really wonderful woman who's now my wife, fiance. And I realized that she was the kind of good person that if she figured out what I was really like, she would dump me real fast. And if she didn't dump me, she was dumb, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So I got very depressed, which is a crazy thing when you're in love to be depressed. You wouldn't think so, right? But I knew there was something broken about who I was at that point, and I needed help. And so I came to the point where I was looking for almost any answer, like I was just searching for anything. And I wound up hearing this radio show, and also got a gospel tract that was, encouraging me to pray to Jesus and seek his help and everything. And even though I was listening to those, and one night I just said, I can't make my life work, and I don't want to ruin hers. So I sat down in my bedroom. I had a shotgun at that point in my life. I pulled out the shotgun and I pointed it to my face. I chambered around and I pulled the trigger, but it didn't go off. It, for whatever reason, miraculously did not go off. It should have. The safety was off and everything, but it didn't go off. But for a moment, for a fraction of a second, I saw hell, and I saw my own destiny ahead of me if I were to do that, if I were actually to shoot myself. And so I stopped and I just began to quiver. I laid the gun down and I thought, I've never really prayed to Jesus. I've done all this searching for every other kind of spiritual idea and trying to get power in my life, but I never just prayed to Jesus. And so I got down on my knees and I just began to call out to Jesus and say, Lord Jesus, if you're there, help me. And I heard this voice come up from within me, not like an audible voice, but just a deep knowing voice inside of me. And it said, if you're going to throw your life away, why don't you give it to me and see what I do with it? And it was just the most calming voice, the most calming sense that came over me. I just began to pray and say, Lord, I give you my life. I trust in you. I don't know what you're going to do with me, but take my life and change it. And I woke up the next morning. And by the way, it was like 2 hours of prayer time. My roommate thought I had lost my mind because the next morning he said, are you okay? And I was more okay than I'd ever been in my life the next morning. And I couldn't really explain it. I didn't have an answer to say, I'm now, right with God or anything. But I knew that something had changed inside of me. And when I went to work that day, I saw the entire world differently. Everything I did, everybody I talked with, I just saw the whole world completely differently. And it was the beginning of an awakening for me. I began to, read my stolen Bible. I had a stolen Bible from the hotel. I began to read my stolen Bible, and look for answers more carefully, more diligently. I began listening to that radio show more frequently, and came to the conclusion that I had become a Christian, but I couldn't describe why. I couldn't look at myself and say, well, now I'm a Christian. But I was still, for several weeks, I was still, on drugs. I was smoking crack with my friends, but every time I would do it, I would feel bad about it. I was like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't who I am. I don't want to do this anymore. And finally, one day I sat down at lunch at work. It was in those days, a construction worker. And I always took 2 bottles of beer to work with me every day, just the way I was. And I was about to drink one of the bottles of beer, and I just, in my head, didn't say anything out loud, but I just thought to myself, Lord, I thought you would take this all away from me. And I heard another time a voice that just spoke to me like the calmest voice I've ever heard in my life. And Jesus said to me, I gave you the power to put that down the moment you gave your life to me. And I took that bottle, I opened it out, I poured it out, I poured the other one out. I walked down to my truck, I opened up my Jack Daniels bottle and poured it out. I grabbed my bag of weed and I poured that out. And about that moment, one of my coworkers began to yell out, "Stop! What are you doing?" He ran down, he grabs the stuff, he's like, "Give me that," And but for me, that was it. I never really had any sense of an addiction after that. There were times where I would kind of go, "Oh, I remember getting high or whatever," but I never ever really wanted to be high. I never wanted to be stoned. I never wanted to do drugs again. It was just like that was an old piece of clothing that I took off that was dirty and made me feel uncomfortable. And God set me free from that. And so, my life from that point on has changed, and I've tried to tell people that ever since. But I had one more very crazy experience that there was one more step I had to go through. So I led my wife, that time she was still my fiance, to the Lord. We started going to a church to believe the Bible. And she began to, follow and learn the truth and became a woman of prayer and everything. And she learned from our pastor, who, praise God, he was a man of just absolute walk in the Spirit and the Word. And he taught us all about spiritual, realms and spiritual warfare and how to deal with demons and everything. And we had the worst argument ever this one night. And I tore a door off the hinges in my house and threw it at her, which thank God I missed her. But I was enraged, and I had a problem with rage in those days. I actually went to hit her. I grabbed a hold of her. Again, we were having this bad argument, and she just stopped, and just as calmly as you can imagine, she just said, "In the name of Jesus, come out of him." And boom, I saw a demon come out of me. Now, a lot of people would say theologically that's not supposed to work that way, because I prayed to receive.
I know. I was just like going, "What the heck?" Okay,
right?
What? So yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't. A lot of people say that's not supposed to work that way. And I don't talk about a lot because, frankly, a lot of Christians would be upset about hearing that that's how it worked. But that's what happened. That demon came out of me, and I suddenly realized that all that rage I was feeling was not me. That was something that was putting rage into me. And it came out of me, and I saw it. I saw this physical manifestation. It was just for a moment, but I saw it. And my wife didn't see what I saw, but she saw something like a shadow, right, suddenly move away from me. And she saw the change on me. And I'll tell you what, I turned into just a limp rag of just tears and not knowing what to do at that point. Because I realized that for the first time I understood there was a real demonic force that had been inside of me. And so anyway, the long and the short of what I'm saying for that is just to say that it changed my life utterly. I've been a different person since then. I'm not saying I've been perfect by any means. I make a lot of mistakes. I cause more trouble than I'm supposed to sometimes, But I have had a very strong, very continual sense of the power and presence of Christ in my life ever since. And even years later came to realize that I was struggling with a spirit of depression. So that spirit of rage was something that I was struggling with. But for many years, I struggled with a spirit of depression. And so feeling oppressed by that, depressed by it. And a lot of it is really just learning how to walk with God and trust his word, walk in the Spirit, and you see those things go. Now, I didn't ever see that like physically manifest and leave me, but I know that in the years since, the last many years now, I have seen that spirit of depression just get off of me, and I'm free from it. I don't struggle with that anymore. I go through challenges like everybody, and I get up the next day and just keep going. But for a long time, that was very hard for me to get past that because of that oppressive spirit that I was experiencing. So, yeah, I have some experience with the spiritual world, and I know it's real. It's not a joke. It's not fake. So.
It's an extraordinary story there, and thank you for sharing with us, Ian. Wow, that is phenomenal what you've been through, and obviously your time wasn't up yet, right? You go to shoot this,
Yeah,
the trigger doesn't go off. Well, obviously there's a sign just in that as well. Definitely not your time. And how long ago did all that happen?
Well, that was many years back. I mean, the between the tunnel fire and the my attempted suicide was about a 4-year span, and then the demon attack, spirit of rage, that was within a few months of when I sought the Lord and gave my life to Him and everything. So that was probably within 4 months of that at the most. And then, the whole depression thing was something that I battled with for many years, and finally came to grips with about the year 2000, 2001, that it was not just a physical thing. I grew up sort of like Charlie Brown, right? Probably most of the audience don't even know who Charlie Brown is, right? But,
I do. I used to watch it all the time. I love it, and I just recently, within the last couple of years, got the DVD for the Christmas specials for Charlie Brown, because it just means a lot to me. So yeah.
I was that kid, if you ever watch those Charlie Brown, cartoons, he'd be playing baseball and somebody would say, "Hey, heads up," and he'd look and the ball would hit him in the head and hit the ground. That was me. Literally, that happened to me a number of times. But I was that kid that just life always seemed to hit me sideways when I wasn't looking at it. And, I feel like along the way, all those different experiences sort of gave me a heaviness that I felt life was just bad, And here's the problem with all that. You can get into a real problem of self-pity. And, the demons love for people to do that. And it changes your thinking. You begin to see everything in a negative light. And so the more you dwell on things like that, the more that the spirits come at you to rob you of the joy of life. And, the amazing thing is that what I've come to realize is that Jesus is a life-giving spirit. And when I just hang on to Him, trust Him, walk with Him, I have joy. I have joy that doesn't come from me. I have joy that comes from Him and that is empowering. So even in the hardest circumstances, I always have Him with me. I always have His comfort. I always have His joy, His resources. And when you focus on that, when you begin to recognize, who your maker is, and you give Him the glory and you seek Him, that life-giving spirit just continually strengthens and renews you. To the point where it doesn't matter if you get hit in the head by the baseball. You kind of go, all right, I guess I should have paid attention. Doesn't mean the life is hitting me. It just means I need to be more aware of my surroundings,
Or the episodes where like Lucy was holding the football on the ground and then he would go kick it and she would pull it out. And then he would fall on his back. Oh my gosh.
That was me too. Yeah. I had a Lucy like that in my life.
I feel you with that, Ian. I've had my bouts of depression in the past, and I battled with alcohol abuse and drug abuse for a long time as well. Very self-destructive. And then I learned that hurt people, and I realized I was so hurting myself, and was looking for answers in lots of different areas, and went through a born again Christian stage when I was young. Actually, I got kicked out of home very young, and went through that. And then I saw the dark side of that too, that can happen with some churches as well, or some sort of religion.
Yeah, that's where religion comes in and often can wound people.
Yeah, and then I got turned away from all that, and then found different ways. But eventually I've come to this point, and that's the thing. Everyone's on their own journey with this, and I think it's important to embrace all of it, because if you didn't have those dark moments, you wouldn't be where you are today. You wouldn't have the faith that you have today if you didn't come through all that. So I think that's part of the human experience, part of the journey of life. And these dark entities or spirits are absolutely real. As Erin says here on Facebook, it's real. Erin, hi Vonan, good to see you on Facebook. Erin says they hop into the aura field of a person, these dark spirits. Yeah, they do. They hop into your aura field, and you can definitely sense it with some people. And this is where, when someone said to me years ago, 9/11 was an inside job, don't you? I'm like, what do you mean 9/11 was an inside job, right? And then I started to look into it and started to see all this evidence that was never shown in the mainstream media of how it was an inside job. And that's very hard for a lot of people to get their head around, is why would people within America, why would certain people want to kill so many of its own people? But of course, what happened after that is the war on terror happened after that. And, if you want to know what's going on in the world, follow the money trail, right? And so we think, well, there are some, what we call elites, these very evil, dark forces that are in the world. We know about Pizzagate. We know about the child sacrifices. We know about Epstein Island. We know about this sort of demonic type of practices that happen out there. They are absolutely 100% real.
They are real.
And there's lots of evidence of it out there. You probably won't find it on YouTube, but you'll find it on places like BitChute and Rumble. And, so this is where, looking into this alternative media now, thank goodness we have this alternative media now where more of the truth is coming out. And this is what I'm seeing is that yes, they are evil. Absolutely, Aaron. They are absolute evil. And it's hard to fathom how some people can be so evil. However, most likely they have some very dark spirits within them, right? They, they're most likely operating that way. And a lot of these.
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize about spiritual, demons, spiritual oppression, any of that. A lot of times people, we tend to think when a person is, let's say, demon possessed, they're going to act like a madman. And that's true. I've known a few of those. I've met a number of those over the years. But there are people who have demons who often look very well made up, who do not appear at all to be, demon possessed or evil on the outside. But this is the nature of evil, is that it is deceptive. And so there are many things where when you begin to peel back the layers, you discover, there's real evil here. And most people, the average person isn't going to see that on a daily basis. The things you're talking about, some of the folks you're, listening to us right now may not even have a clue that there is a 9/11 conspiracy, or, that there's Pizzagate, or what does that mean, or any of that. Although, again, I do. But the problem is that you were talking about alternative media, and why isn't the mainstream media reporting it? Well, they're in on a lot of it.
Yes.
A lot of people aren't aware of the fact that there are, for lack of a better word, they don't necessarily call it satanic or, that sort of thing.
Luciferian, that's what I call
Luciferian it. That's a really good word for it. There are Luciferian societies that practice these dark arts that are engaging people, and many, many, many of them are in, the major media. They're in government. They're in all these different, high places. And, they are real. They're actively deceiving people, and there's a whole dark world of evil stuff out there that frankly, most people don't even want to think about. Let's go to the theme park. Let's go watch football, because I'm not interested in knowing about that. Until it happens to your kid, when your kid gets kidnapped, and then you realize, I actually have two family members and a family member of a friend who were drawn into human trafficking. And this is way back, long before this was known mainstream at all. But yeah, so, these kind of things are real, and people have to be aware of it, because we can't stop it if there isn't an awareness. But I love that this awareness is growing. You talked about that in your preamble to the show today, that the awareness is just growing exponentially. And that is so hopeful, because hopefully we can make enough people aware that we can stop a lot of these things, right? That we can deliver the people from the darkness. That's really what I feel is my calling. And when I say, that I'm a troublemaker, I want to make trouble for the kingdom of darkness.
Mm.
That's my calling. That's my purpose.
Yes.
But yeah, so, we want to end these things, and we want to deliver the children who are being taken captive. There's a whole industry around it. And, I don't want to run over your show, but my wife and I adopted children. And when you go through a foreign adoption, there are mountains you have to climb that most people never even understand. In our case, we had to comply with 5 different legal justice systems, 2 states, federal government, plus the UN and the country we were adopting them from. And one of the things you have to go through in studying about all this stuff is what's going on with human trafficking. Back in the 2000s and onward, children were being literally stolen from villages in Guatemala, put up for adoption, and then being adopted by people who were actually putting them into all sorts of, I'll just say, evil trade. Leave it at that, because I don't know how your audience might react to that. But there are some really evil trades.
Like you could go into it if you want to. Like we don't.
Well, I mean, so there's obviously the sex
anything.
trade.
Yeah.
There's the sex trade. That's one of the evil trades. But there's also a whole industry around, human organs.
Yes.
Parting children out for human organs. That's an industry. There's another industry around, and this is where a lot of the really filthy rich people. You want to know how some stars look like they're still only 30 when they're actually 60 and 70 years old.
I'll say the word. It's called adrenochrome. Look it up, guys. Adrenochrome.
They harvest hormones from children, and then they take those hormones either intravenously or orally. And the scary part of it is that this is exactly how many of the very ultra rich and famous are maintaining their youthful appearances.
Yep.
Because they are no longer who they once were. And so, of course, the rich and powerful don't want us to know about that industry, but it's going on. I mean, they'll put out, TV dramas that sort of hint about this stuff, right? You'll see more of it. Like BBC actually has done a number of television dramas around these themes and concepts. But for the most part, they don't want us to know this is happening, but it's happening all the time.
And the truth is they do put it in your face. The movie Monsters, Inc. is a perfect example of what they do with the kids.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they're grooming children all the time for this stuff. And sometimes it's grooming them for the sex trade, but often it's grooming them to be easily taken. And so they target kids that are going to be easy to take. But anyway, the whole thing that the government of Guatemala discovered that this was happening. Children were being taken out of villages, adopted, quote unquote, by American parents, but actually those American parents were not raising those kids from Guatemala for the most part. Some did. There are some who did, but there was a large enough industry that the government of Guatemala got a hold of it and realized this is what was happening. And they shut down right in the middle of our adoption. They shut down a couple of different adoption agencies that were part of the traffic of these kids. Haiti also is one of the countries that's had some of this happening where the kids just disappear off the streets. Nobody knows where they go. Nobody knows who's taking them because there's no law and order there right now. So it's a really sad, tragic situation. And I only bring that up to say that, again, the conspiracies are real. There's way more to this than most people want to admit. And sadly, it can happen to your kids.
Yes.
We have a friend whose daughter, was caught up into human trafficking. And sadly, she was trafficked in their own city and nobody knew it. She was being, sold for slave sex in their own city for almost a year, I think, before she was able to get free. And it's just tragic stuff. It's like, the movie Taken, right? That movie starring Liam Neeson, that scenario really does happen. That's not made up.
And another good movie is The Sound of Freedom, which talks about this. Fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. Erin says, yes, I agree. I just want to welcome everyone on the live stream here. MD Moshio Roman, good to see you there. We have Nick Mauser. He says, wow, what a story. He's sharing your story. Amazing. Neil McAlpine. Good to see you, Neil. I'm here with listening ears. Cheers on Facebook. Niles Mauser is with us on YouTube. Good to see you there. Thank you so much for joining us. And on Instagram, we've got It's Stacey Turner. We've got Raina Brad, Robert Mull. Good to see you. We've got Wolf1111 there. NH1H1 has joined us as well. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. We were discussing earlier on the difference between spirituality and religion, and I found a little AI overview that has popped up on my Google about this. And very simply, it says here, spirituality is a personal connection to something greater than yourself, while religion is a set of organized beliefs and practices shared by a community. And I think that's a fairly accurate description of spirituality versus religion. There's a community of organized beliefs and practices in religion, whereas spirituality is a personal connection. Essentially, though, most people are looking for peace and they're looking for purpose, right? So whatever way that you go about looking for that, it's going to be different for everyone, perhaps. And I'd love to hear from you, those who are joining us on the live stream. What are your thoughts on this conversation so far? Wudette's just joined us on Instagram. Good to see you. What are your thoughts about spirituality, religion, the truth about spirituality? Now, it's interesting that this AI overview here says spirituality is a personal connection to something greater than yourself. Now, some people say that God is within us, or that we are actually God. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Because, you know, people like Dr. John D. Martini, for example, he talked about pits and pedestals. When we put someone on a pedestal, then we're often putting ourselves in the pit. And so, you know, to find this balance in life. Now, God being someone, or Jesus being someone, well, there's the story of Jesus and the story of God. So what are your thoughts on that, is that you are God? When people say you are God, what do you say?
You asking me or the audience?
I'm asking you, yeah. And for those who are joining us, Janet, good to see you. Such an enlightening conversation. Yes, it is. Certainly enlightening is the word there, Janet. Thank you so much. Yeah, thoughts on when people say you are God?
No, I don't accept that, because that would be a terrifying notion. If I'm God, then the world is in chaos and is going to unravel. It's first of all, there's abundant evidence from a very deep and wide resource that we have called the Bible that shows us that that's not true. But that doesn't mean we're not spiritual. We are spiritual creatures. The problem is that without God, who is the creator of spirit, who is the source of all spirit, if we're not connected with him, then we have a problem. And the creator, who's given us Christ, who's given us the prophetic word of the Bible, has shown us repeatedly through the Bible that man has a problem. That is, we are rebellious spirits against him. And so the message of the Bible is he wants to call us home. He calls us home in Christ. And, the Bible says in Jeremiah 17, verse 13, that we have forsaken the Lord, who is the fountain of living waters. Well, the living waters is the idea of the life spirit of the whole of creation that we're part of. And again, just going back to the fact that I really truly believe we are all spiritual. Everything is spiritual in a sense. But the problem is that we are rebel spirits. And so that's why man has this problem. We look at everything in the world and we're like, okay, chimpanzees don't have the problem. Gorillas don't have the problem. Dolphins and orcas don't have the problem. Why is it that man has this problem that we are so self-destructive but mutually destructive? Where does that come from? And that comes from the disconnect with our creator. And so the call that the creator's given us in Jesus Christ is come home. And the answer to that is to be born of the Spirit from above, which is, he says, to be born again, to be born from above, which is not a religious concept. And a lot of people think that it is, but Jesus is teaching this to a very religious man when we learn this in the Bible in John chapter 3. And it's the religious man who can't get it, right? Jesus' disciples, they all got it already, that they needed to have a rebirth of their spirit. And the great news is that God wants us to come to him. He wants us to be in fellowship and in union with him. And that's what I found was when I began to seek that fellowship and that union with God, it changed my life. It gave me hope. It gave me freedom. It gave me control in the world of who I am that I needed control over. I was my biggest problem. I could do anything. I could solve problems. I could make things. I could tear things down. I could solve all sorts of problems outside of myself. The problem was inside of myself. I was incredibly self-destructive, and I was also harming and hurting the people around me. When I got that healed inside of me because of Jesus, it enabled me to have a whole new outlook on everything. And I'm not saying I'm a perfect person by any means. I'm just saying my outlook changed. And the beauty of it is that I have lived an adventure. If I could share with your audience, my adventure would take like 2 hours just to summarize the adventure of life I've been on for the last 3 decades since then. Because God has taken me around the world and around the corner to see really, truly amazing things. Just in the fact of my wife and I adopting our children, we adopted kids from Haiti. And we were in the process of that before the earthquake. The earthquake actually was looking like it was going to stop our adoption. But we had so many miraculous things to come together, so many answers to prayer that made it possible. The kids came home within 12 days from when the earthquake happened. And it looked on, day 1 and 2 that was never going to be possible again. And yet the kids came home, and it was actually done by the U.S. government and by our state governor. The kids came home to us, and my wife and my daughter had a lot of faith about this to really be praying about it and anticipating that God would answer our hunger, our need to bring them home. And both of them told me, they said, God has told me really clearly in my prayer time that he is going to bring the kids to us. And I kept saying, it doesn't work that way. Okay. It's not going to happen. So just stop thinking about that. You're being hopeful, but it's not helpful to have false imaginations. But that's exactly what happened. The U.S. government wound up bringing our kids to us, and the governor of Colorado wound up bringing our kids from Florida to the U.S. government brought them to Florida, and our governor brought them from Florida to Colorado and brought them to us in a private hangar at a private ceremony, exactly as we had been told in their prayer time. So, and there's so many different things. I mean, I could go on just for an hour just about all how that worked out. One of the amazing parts of it was that a dear friend of ours who was my prayer partner at the time, I met with him every week on Wednesday mornings at 6 a.m. And we had a small group of guys praying. 2 of us were adopting from the same orphanage in Haiti. And this personal friend of ours worked for the government. And in that time, he happened to get assigned to being the man in charge of what to do with the Haitian, refugees and the Haitian, what am I trying to say? The word is, to help the people. I'm trying to think of the word, but anyway, providing provisions for the folks in Haiti. And he simply asked us, he said, where do you want food dropped? Where would you like it delivered? And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I'm in charge of this. So where's your orphanage? Because we'll make sure at least one of the drops is within reach of your orphanage so that they can get some food. And so a personal friend of ours was just moved into that position for a very short period of time to see to it that the resources our kids needed in their orphanage were provided for. And again, there's so many answers to prayer that we saw that, bringing our kids out of all that trauma and terror that they went through. So I come to say, really, the bottom line is that I don't just believe in God, but I am firmly convicted that God is real. Jesus is our Savior. God loves us. He wants to redeem us. He died to pay the penalty of our rebellion. And God's got an open door for us. We just have to walk into it. And that's not about religion. That's about a relationship with the Creator, the life-giving Spirit.
In Haiti, they said over 700,000 people in October 2024, according to the International Organization for Migration, over 700,000 people were displaced across Haiti, more than half of whom were children.
Yeah.
So that's very a lot of children that needed homes. So it's amazing that you were able to help out there. I think that's wonderful. Coming back to the question about, thoughts about you being God or part of you being God. Erin says here, spirituality is energy and spirit. I think we are part of God. We are energy and a soul. We are part of God. We are energy and a soul. And then I come back to Genesis 1:27 in the Bible. It says, God created man in his own image. So what does this mean? God created man in his own image. Doesn't mean in human form, according to someone online here, but rather that humans are in the image of God in their moral, spiritual, and intellectual nature. In the image of God, moral, spiritual, and intellectual nature, which is very interesting. So thoughts around that?
Before he answers, I'm going to interject here and just say, yeah, we are directly God's DNA. Directly God's DNA. He created us. For his glory. He created us for his purpose. He created us to bring others, but at the most absolute way. I mean, I don't, Ian, you probably are going to explain this a lot better than I am right now, but the only way I know how to explain that is in the most real and reality sense that there is. We are directly part of God's DNA.
I think there's a lot to that. I mean, he certainly created it. And I do believe that. I believe that he is the source of the information that makes up DNA what it is. I mean, DNA is a library of, encoded information that tells our cells what to do, right? How we form. And a lot of people don't really face that.
Even our hands, like this is such an intricate design that all I have to do is think and my hand moves. I mean, if you really kind of think about this, that in itself is very, I don't know the word to use for it, but this is amazing, right?
It is amazing. There's a phrase in a movie that's a kind of a family favorite. If anybody's ever seen the movie Blast from the Past, I think it was the greatest movie that, I can't even think of his name now. Brendan Fraser made. He's the key star in it. And he says in the movie, my father believes that everything is a miracle. And now I understand why, because for the first time he goes to the ocean and he sees, how the ocean works and everything. But anyway, I believe that. I really do, that every single thing that we are and experience is miraculous and is spiritual, but there is a difference between the five senses tangible world that we see, that we live in every day, versus the spirit that is the source of that. And so, we are matter, we are energy, and we have a soul, but there's a deeper level beyond that. And that's where the problem is that mankind, we were created in his image, but we do not walk in his image. We walk in the image of his enemy primarily. So we kind of have this dual nature, right? We've been created by the most loving, kind, generous being that exists in the world, God, right? He's the source of all life, all beauty, everything. The Bible tells us that every good and perfect gift is from the Father of lights.
Yes.
But there's a warped thing about the world. There is a chaos that's happening in the world. Where did that come from? And that comes from God's enemy. And we can debate that forever. But the point is that that's an aberrant code in the system, let's say. If you think of us as being, an encoded creation, there's a broken code in the creation. And unfortunately, the broken code is embedded within us as human beings, so that we are no longer truly in the image of God. We are in the image of rebels against our Creator. And most of us don't like to think of it that way, but it's really just saying, I don't want you, right? We're putting a hand in the face of God. I'm going to do it my way, right? And so we think that that's okay, that because we're like frogs in a pond that's never seen clear water, right? In a swamp. We don't know what we don't know. And it's not until you have the Spirit of Christ come in you that makes you aware of the fact, oh, there's a whole level beyond what I understood. And that's when you become, in communion with God for the first time. Your awareness goes off and you go, oh, the world is different than I thought. It's not what I thought it was. So anyway, I just say that there is the nature of man, that we were created in his image, but we're not anymore in his image until we let him take back over. And that's the hard part for us, right? Is learning to let God be in control of who we are.
Yes.
That's the beautiful thing we're trying. That's what really, somebody said it's like a song that was sung over us when we were born that we've never heard since then. And we've craved to hear that song ever since. And so, when you finally figure out where the song came from and who it was that sung over you, the beauty of the world becomes alive again for you. And that's really what it means to, or what it's like, I think, to give your life to Jesus, is to hear the song of the Creator singing over you. That He created us with love. He wants us to love Him back. That's the calling of life, is to love our lover, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good segue for Neil McAlpine's comment here in Facebook. He says the cosmic connection to the love energy we carry within opens doorways beyond the planetary beliefs and understandings to the love energy. I love that, Neil. Absolutely. I believe, within I would say within most faiths that I know of, and within most religions, essentially people do want peace. They want love. They want connection. Yeah. And I think we all have different ways of expressing that, or different ways of finding that, and different stories around where that comes from or what that is. What we do know is the minute we die, our body becomes lighter. The minute we die. So we know we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? And in that human experience, as you say, Ian, there's some codes that have been broken. I mean, Satan was a fallen angel, right? Yeah. And we have here, Aaron earlier mentioned the light and dark energy, like the yin yang of life, right? And sometimes it's kind of like smoke and mirrors. Sometimes it's hard to pick the dark energies. Sometimes we think they're light energies, and we see this, all through life. I've seen examples of this. Where I think people are amazing, essentially amazing, in how they're showing up. And then the dark energies can come through at any moment. And so this is where a lot of people have trust issues, right? Yeah. This dark and light energy. Yeah. So other thoughts around that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like to believe what you said, that everybody wants peace. There are some people that don't care about that at all. I think we have to admit that there are some people who actually thrive on chaos.
Right. Okay. Yes.
And I think the problem, one of the reasons why so many people get turned off by Jesus, the Bible, God, and this sort of thing, is that they've been to religious institutions where there are people in the institution that thrive on chaos. They talk about God, they talk about Jesus, but they don't implement what they're being given from Him. And so religion often can be as bad, or in some cases worse, than having no faith, no religion at all. So like I said at the beginning, religion has value. The problem is it's not enough value for what we really need, because what we really need is at the core of our being. That's why God sent Jesus. The good side of it is that God is patient with us. He is willing to work His truth into us and restore us to the value that He put on us in the beginning. Because think about this, okay? So Jesus comes out of heaven. He comes to live as a human being in this fallen world, which is in and of itself is an astonishing thing, coming out of perfection down to the chaos of mortality, subjecting Himself to the evil people of the world, and then subjecting Himself to suffering and then death, just to show us that He rose again from the grave to give us life. So we know that, yes, He was man, He lived as a man, but He is God. He is the Creator. That's how He rose from the dead. He had the power over death to restart a new creation. And so the beautiful thing for us is that we can, any of us, wherever you don't have to have a church or a building or an institution or some, authorized character giving it to you. Hey, the authorized character to give you the life of God is Jesus Himself. Call out to Him and He will answer you. He tells you that in the Bible. Call to me and I will answer you. And so, for people that are struggling, especially anybody in your audience who is struggling addictions or fears or any kind of oppression or depression, call it to God, call it to Jesus, because he'll give you new life. I mean, the way I look at it is, if God would work in a completely low-end, worthless guy like me, because I really was a very low-end, worthless person before I became a Christian, if he would change my life, he'll do it for anybody. I was a very below average person. My mom wouldn't agree to that. What's that?
Maybe in how you were showing up. It's maybe you felt that way in how you were showing up. But if you think about it, we're all 1 in a billion by birth, right? Here's where the sex bit comes in, right? 1 in a billion by birth. We beat a billion swimmers to get to the finish line, right? So we are extraordinary. We're all extraordinary, right? And I do believe, by birth, essentially kids just want to have fun, etc. They just want to play, and they want to, essentially, I believe we are, I would say, innocent or have that godlike energy, right? Right. And then as we get older, we get shut down and we start to behave in ways that maybe aren't so desirable. And I do believe we get conditioned to live in drama and to live in chaos. As you said, some people love the chaos. Why is that? They've been programmed from a young age through the mainstream media, through government, through the organizations that we've been brought to believe that we should be trusting these organizations. And now we know we cannot trust a lot of the authorities, a lot of the elites in the world. We cannot trust them because they have this agenda of mass destruction going on, right? We're seeing it with the fires. We've seen it with the jabs. We've seen it with so many different areas. We've seen this rollout of mass destruction that's been happening. And really, this is where I do believe spirituality or religion or whatever it is for you, having that connection to God or to to the greater organized design, to spirit, having that connection, I think is really, really, really crucial now to be able to stay strong.
Absolutely.
Amongst all the chaos out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There is chaos out there, and it's getting worse. It's people are being driven because I believe that the people who are the powers that be in the world that are the dark force people that are trying to force change on the world, right? Mm-hmm. They're trying to push us into a mold they want us to live in, and I do believe they are largely led. The elites are largely led by demon spirits.
Yes, 100%.
And whatever is their motivation, they are trying to impose on us a new world order, so to speak, for lack of a better term, that says, we will accept their leadership, their rule, their calling, purposes, whatever, for humanity, and we're just going to have to do it. And what they do is anybody who doesn't agree with that gets shamed, labeled, marginalized, whatever they can do. But again, thank God for alternative media, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because at least we can share among each other and hopefully win a few converts right along the way.
Yeah.
That these things are going on. But I totally agree with you on that, Aldwyn. It's you have to be grounded in these days. You have to have certainty in these days, because the powers that be are stripping us of anything that we can sort of rest on and feel comfortable in. And it's going to keep coming. It's not going to end. COVID was I think it's a shot across the bow, personally, to see how much control the government can impose. And of course, you guys down there in Australia, you saw it worse than anybody in Victoria. Yes. They pretty much put you guys into complete martial law lockdown, didn't they?
Yes, 262 days of lockdown, and we've had 4 times the suicide rates worldwide since the lockdowns as well, through the whole pandemic, through those 4 years or so. We there's a million people a year worldwide normally take their own lives, so 4 times that through the whole pandemic. Now what's interesting, back to the Bible for a second. Now the Bible, it says, was written starting around 1400 BC and ending in the 2nd century CE. So that's over quite a period of time that the Bible was written. And they talked in Revelations about end times, right? The perilous end times. Yeah. And to think that it was prophesied that many years ago of what we're actually seeing now in the world. What are your thoughts?
We are seeing the things that were talked about by the ancient prophets and by Jesus and by the apostles, but especially by the book of Revelation, seem to be converging right now, all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was trying to agree with you. But did you have a question in that?
Yeah, like, so what does Revelation say about end times? And people say, well, Jesus is going to come back potentially, and I know it talks about fires, etc., and wars, and what are your thoughts on what's going on in the world?
Jesus gives. Sure, go ahead.
Here's something I'll share with that, and then Ian, definitely go ahead. But my beliefs around a lot of that have been changing recently. As I follow, there's a couple people that I follow on Rumble. One of them, her name is Melissa Red Pill the World, and she is total Christian and everything else. And she's got some interesting thoughts around, the Book of Revelations and things that, as I hear her speak of, and I've been through all of her books, I got them on audio. But when I listen to those, when I listen to her books, I am forced to sit back and go, that makes a heck of a lot more sense than what we were taught through the church. And things like, the mark of the beast. There's a lot of fear and a lot of, just fear and scarcity that the church has placed around the mark of the beast. And she actually brings the point, why would God put his people through something like that? And put his people through something that they were unsure if they took the mark of the beast or something. There's a lot of fear going on around that. And her outlook around that, I was just like, that actually makes a lot more sense. The mark of the beast really has nothing to do with us. The mark of the beast is actually these elites. They've taken the mark because they've given their souls over to the enemy. That's the mark of the beast. And then she also has another view on what is the beast of Revelation? What is the Antichrist? Who is it? And her point of view is it's actually it's these elites. It's the World Health Organization. It's all of these people. They are the ones that are the Antichrist, the organizations and stuff. That's the Antichrist. Because her point is why, I guess Revelation talks about how the temple will be built and all this other stuff, and then the beast will go in there and everybody will know that that's. But if you think about it, that doesn't make sense either. Why would the enemy reveal himself as that and not just come in as infiltration from within as what we've already seen? That would make more sense with the deceptive enemy. So I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are. And I think that's one of the big questions. Of course, the Bible predicts that in the last days, people will be questioning, trying to figure these things out. Right.
Yes.
It's one of the key themes. 2 Peter talks a lot about that. And there'll be a movement of people discrediting what the Bible says. That's basically what 2 Peter, I think, chapter 3 is all about.
Yeah, and I've seen that as well. Yes.
So, and that's what Peter predicted. Boy, you open up such a massive can of questions.
I know you did. I'm just like,
I'll try to
do
put
you
it in.
realize what you just opened up?
Yeah. I'll try to put it in succinct terms, because there are basically four major, what I would call the four major perspectives on the Book of Revelation and biblical eschatology, which is the study of future things, right? And so, all of them agree on one thing, and that is the summation of all things is Christ will return, right? That's the agreement on all of it. How and when everything happens between now and then is what's debated and discussed. There's a lot of reasons why I hold firmly to one position, and it's because I look at the whole thing. I try to, this is just my picture, okay? My word picture is that the Bible is like a big, gigantic puzzle, right? And you kind of get a view of what the end picture is going to look like, but you don't get the whole picture very clearly, okay? So we have to try and put it together to see how things go. There are a lot of people that put a small portion of it together and say that's what it is, but they neglect the whole rest of it. There are other people that have the framework, but they miss the core, right? And so what I've tried to do in my understanding is just learn who are the people that understand the whole picture, who understand the whole puzzle, because it really is one big puzzle. I consider the Bible to be an integrated message system from outside our time domain. You know, I've done a lot of research on all the different major groups that study this in detail. Okay, and the conclusion I come with is that everything from Genesis to Revelation is giving us one picture. And I wrote this down because I wanted to share it, actually. And I'm so glad you brought me back to this, because you give me a chance to share something I actually wrote down. In Genesis, the Bible predicts the creator and promised redeemer coming, right? And that he'll be the seed of the woman. In Exodus, it talks about him being the Passover lamb. In Leviticus, the high priest. In Numbers, it reveals him as the waters in the desert and the brass serpent on the pole that heals the people who are bitten by the vipers. In Deuteronomy, it says he becomes a curse for us. And we begin to see these little pictures emerge. And Jesus himself said three things that I think are very interesting. One of them is, he said, the volume of the book is written of me, meaning the whole of the prophetic scripture of the word from, Genesis to Revelation,
correct,
is written of him. He is the topic of it, right?
You can find the gospel in point blank in Genesis, which is absolutely amazing to me.
That's true. And I've seen that, and I love that. He also said that Moses wrote about him. And lastly, he said, Abraham rejoiced to see his day. And so what I perceive Jesus is telling us is that the revelation of him in the Bible is from outside of our time limitations, our domain of time, space, reality.
Sense. Yeah, of course.
And that because God is already in the future. He already knows what's going to happen. And so he reveals these things to us so that wise and prudent people can discover them, right? But he also, Jesus tells us very clearly that things are hidden from those who refuse to believe, who refuse to accept him. And that's one of the things that's kind of astonishing is, why is it that those things are hidden? I'm not quite sure. I can't answer you firmly on that. I have some ideas, of course, but the Bible tells us that Jesus said very clearly that he who has will receive more, but he who has not, what little he has will be taken away. And it's in context of your faith, of your active living faith. So if you have some faith and you invest that faith and work on it, you're going to be given more. But if you have some faith and you neglect it, it's going to dissipate. And I see this so much in people's lives. So many people I've known and worked with over the years where when they fail to activate their faith and really work on digging into what God has revealed, eventually they lose it all. Even the simplest people, and I've known some very basic people, country folk that, look, the sky is blue and water's wet kind of folks. But the more they learn, and I'm kind of an example of that, the more you study, the more you invest your faith, the more clear it becomes to you. So in the Bible, we have all of these. In every different book, we have these different pictures, these what I call vignettes of Jesus. In the Psalms, he's our song. In the Proverbs, he's our wisdom. In Isaiah, he's the wonderful counselor and the suffering servant. The whole ordeal he goes through on the cross is predicted in the book of Isaiah, and it's revealed why in the book of Isaiah. In Daniel, he's the stranger in the fire and the Son of Man who ascends to be with God, right? But all these things go through, even to the point of in the book of Zechariah, it defines the Messiah who is pierced for us, that he's literally pierced, which doesn't make sense in terms of, our human thinking. We think that, if God's going to send a Messiah, he's going to be Superman. He's going to wear a cape. He's going to fly. He's going to do all that. So we don't imagine that he's going to be pierced and to be killed for us. That's a hard thing for us to fathom. But God is not limited by our understanding. He has a purpose that is higher than our understanding. So all of that to say that when we look at it, I like to look at how has God stated plainly what he intends to do. So I believe that what you're saying about the people that were, telling you, no, God has not committed us to, as his people, to endure suffering. But the book of Revelation tells us that there are people who will not, no matter what happens, they will not turn to him. They have chosen to rebel against him.
Yes.
And so I look at the book of Revelation as a sifting, right? Now, in the The book of First Thessalonians, Paul the Apostle is writing to one of the earliest churches that he planted. And he says something very clearly here. He says that God has not appointed us to wrath, right? Meaning the church, the believers who trust in Jesus.
His
we
children,
are not,
his actual children, his
right,
actual
we are not
saved, yeah.
appointed to wrath, okay? And the part that makes sense to is that they believed in when they wrote to him and said, we need to know some things here. What they wrote to him asking for him to answer was, look, some of our people are dying. We thought we were going to get, taken by Jesus before that happened. How's that going to work? And so he's explaining to them that, the people who die first are still going to be resurrected, with us and even before us. But understand that, because they were thinking, hey, we're going through all this suffering and tribulation and persecution. Are we in the tribulation now? And so he clearly says to him, look, you are not appointed to wrath. We as believers are not appointed to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. That's God's purpose. That's what he wants for people. But there are some people who just will not have it. They've got that hand in the face of God and they're saying no. Now, the challenge is, how does that sift out in terms of last days? I personally am of the perspective that the church gets raptured before the wrath of God comes on the world. And the things that lead up to that, maybe we get raptured before those things. Maybe we get raptured as they happen. That's something that's debatable among, scholars. But I believe that God has not appointed us to wrath. He wants us to obtain salvation. That's the clear message that Thessalonian teaches. And, that's what I believe the apostles wanted us to know Jesus taught them.
So now what's interesting about that, and so here's where we kind of get on a little bit of this sticky ground with different beliefs around end times. But see, the interesting thing about that is I am not sure if I definitely don't believe that God has called us, his children, to experience the wrath. Of course not. Why would Christ save us then? What was Christ for then? So logically. However, I'm not necessarily at the belief of the church being raptured before that happens. Why? Well, the Great Awakening is a perfect example. We, the people who were awakened to what was really going on, were then called to be digital soldiers.
Right. Yeah.
And through that digital soldier calling, I believe our calling, through what I believe is going on in the end times, and it's the end times right now for them, not for us. I believe our calling is to be on the front lines of that battle and to fight for that in the meantime. Now, then also something that she also talks about is the 1,000 years of peace. Trump also calls the age we're about to go into the golden age. Well, I'm going, are we about to enter into the 1,000 years of peace? Which means Christ is going to come back again, but not till after the 1,000 years. And then all of that.
No, the scripture is really clear. Jesus is the one that brings in the 1,000 years. That is his kingdom, his rule on the earth is that 1,000 years of peace. Yeah.
Fascinating. I mean, it's just so.
I mean, that's to me very clear.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the roundabout way that, the belief that I have, because it doesn't make sense to me that God would call. So number one, it doesn't make sense to me that God would call his church out when we're the soldiers. We're the warriors. We're not meant for the wrath, but we are his warriors to fight through this. He's called us to that. Calling the church out of that almost seems like, when you look at it in that sense, it doesn't quite make sense.
I'm prepared to answer all that, but I would need time to actually get my notes in order for you. Because I do have answers for that, but I'm actually
throwing that at you right now. Yeah. I mean, because you're very much studied, and so I'm kind of curious what your views are.
I love the question. Yeah. Here's where I think we're at right now. And this is in Matthew chapter 24. And I know that I didn't want to turn this into a Bible study tonight, but I'm loving that I'm getting the chance to do that because I like teaching Bible studies. Jesus was asked by his disciples some questions. And the key to understanding this is understanding the specific questions he asks. He says, tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Now, what they didn't understand is they did not realize he was going to die, rise from the dead, and go into heaven, right? They didn't know that. That was something that they had not perceived that he had been telling them, but they just weren't getting, right? But he kept telling them that he would be coming into his kingdom, and so they were picking up on that. Okay, so they're saying, when will these things happen? Okay, so Jesus gives us some clues. Okay, he says, many are going to come in my name saying, I'm the Christ, and will deceive many. You'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. When we think of people claiming to be Christ, I mean, you can go back to I think it was the early 80s when Jim Jones, had the people drink the Kool-Aid I think it was in Guyana, down in South America. He was one of those people claiming to be Christ, right? And so I kind of look at him as the beginning of the modern messianic or false messianic movements. There's lots of false teachers and false churches and all that kind of thing out there I don't want to get into, but he was sort of the beginning of that cult phase of the end times. And, look, you've got David Koresh, who believed he was the Christ, and all these different people that are around the world. And there's a number of them, even that are alive today, that claim to be Christ, right? And so Jesus says, you're going to hear these things. And this is just one little sign, one fragment. Okay. He says, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled by that. Okay. So in other words, wars are not a sign, but those will be happening. And the fact that he says wars and rumors of wars kind of sounds to me like we're sort of always on the edge of a war right now. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it seems like war is just the nature of the world we're in right now. There's so many wars going on in this world. It's crazy. And not to mention the ones we've been involved in as a nation, right? Then he says, all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Nation rise against nation. Now, that word nation means it's ethnos, where we get the idea of ethnic groups, right? And so really what it's talking about is tribalism. Look at what's happening right now in America. We have the worst tribalism we have had since the Civil War.
Yes.
Right. So tribalism is a major issue right now.
And they've created that. They have created the separation between the religions. They've created the separations between the political parties. They've created all that because they want us divided.
We're being pitted against one another. It's sort of like if you've ever heard the analogy of the black ants and the red ants being put in a jar. They're fine being together in the jar until you shake the jar, and then they get angry and start killing each other. Right. That's kind of where we're at the moment, I think. So he says, all these are the beginning of the sorrows. Okay. Now, what he goes into next is that many false prophets will rise up, and oh my gosh, there's so many crazy movements these days. It's not even worth discussing. To deceive many, and lawlessness will abound, and the love of many will grow cold. And here's what the church is seeing, and this is what's freaking out people in the mainstream church, is people left for COVID and never came back. Yeah. Right. People are falling out the back door faster than they're coming in the front door right now in so many churches today. Whole areas of cities that used to be, church row the churches are closing up. In parts of the Northeast, they've been closed for so long, it's not even funny. It's just amazing how many people are growing cold to the faith, to the things of faith, and not caring about what's really going on in the world. Hey, look, my team is winning now. I don't really care about Pizzagate. Okay, somebody else's kid got taken. It doesn't bother me. It didn't happen in my neighborhood. People's hearts are growing cold. And yet, and this is where I love what you're talking about, because the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. So we got work to do. We've got work to do. And I believe that's where we're at right now, is we are to continue to share the gospel, share the good news, encourage people, turn to God, trust in him. I'm not here trying to impress you to join any religion. I don't represent any religion. I belong to a number of churches. My wife and I always seek out a good church wherever we live. But I'm not here to try and push people into that. What I want people to know is that God is real, Jesus is real, he loves you, and he wants to save you. He wants to redeem you and give you a dimension of spiritual life that you have not known yet. So that's really where, that message comes in for us. But there's a whole nother level that goes even deeper than this in this statement that Jesus has that talks about The weather changing, right? We just seen
Weather.
a blizzard along the Gulf Coast of America. That's a big deal. It talks about earthquakes happening in crazy different places. Those are all parts of things that they've always happened. Don't get me wrong. These things have always happened, but it's the rapidity and that they're converging all at the same time.
They're
all
condensing.
Around us.
It's all condensing together and intensifying.
The intensity of it that is being amazing to me. But I take hope in, again, this verse 14, the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations. And then the end will come. So he's going to work out how the end part comes. I don't have to worry about that. My part is I want to just keep sharing Jesus with people. I love Jesus. He has changed my life. He has changed the life of so many people I know. I can't even count the number of people that I've met who have had radical transformed lives by turning themselves over to Jesus. And that's all I want to share with people is hope. That's it.
Amazing. Gosh, there's so much we can chat about this, but I do want to add just something to that too from Revelation.
I love it.
Sorry, Aldwyn, we kind of dominated the conversation.
No, that's okay. Revelation 6:3-17. Now, in Revelation, it talks about war, famine, disease, and death coming in the end times. There's a section in here which is all happening, and it's probably been happening since the beginning of time. Actually, there's probably been war, disease, famine, and death. Happening for years. It's just that we're seeing. I believe the war that's happening now is happening on multi levels. It's happening on with physical, mental, emotional, spiritual warfare going on, and we've certainly been like the ants in the jar. We have been shaken up. Right. And who is going to make it out alive, so to speak, right? Who is going to make it out of this jar? Like, what's it going to take to come out of this jar? Now, this section in Revelations, I want to draw your attention to, which backs up what you're saying. The Lord does not delay his promise, as some understand delay, but is patient with you, not wanting any to perish, but all to come to repentance. Not wanting any to perish, but all to come to repentance, which also talks about what Ken was saying there. And Niles Mauser's got something to add to this too on YouTube. Niles Mauser, this isn't new, nor is it common only to our era. I lived through the 60s and 70s. No one knows when he returns, but we're instructed to be watchful. Tribalism isn't new. Look at World War II. Climate has changed throughout history. We've been having heat waves here in Australia, where it's summer, of course, at the moment. Climate has changed throughout history. Be careful not to project your hope in him onto life's current circumstances. Yes, share the gospel, build disciples. And also he says here, the millennial discussion is fascinating, but not essential to the redemptive salvation of Jesus. He taught us to firstly believe, truly believe, and to repent and change your life. Fascinating. Fascinating. Final thoughts on that, Ken? We've been chatting for over 90 minutes now. We do need to start wrapping up.
So, Ian, by the way, you see how quickly the time goes when you're on the show with us. It's this. Oh my gosh. So anyhow, I'm actually going to turn over that to you to combat, some of the things that were in there, because overall, like, I understand what he's saying, but there were some things that I was like, okay. So,
well, I don't want to be combative by any means. I don't mean to contend against anybody. My only contention is to contend for the faith, which I agree with him in that. That's our core. That's our essential.
Yes, correct.
Is to stand for the truth, the good news of Jesus Christ. How the details work out, that's in God's hands, not mine. And I certainly, whatever I believe isn't going to impose anything on that. That's where I think being watchful is really the key, like he said. So, the point I think is not that these things haven't happened before, because war, death, famine, disease, all that's always been part of the world around us in different measures. I'm a student of history to enough degree to know that. But what's different, I think, is that it's all converging in on us, where there's this word that Jesus uses, with perplexity, meaning that it is so fast and so increasing in its rapidity and its intensity, that I feel like that's why people's hearts are growing cold, is because they would just rather that they could just tune out, and I get like that sometimes. I don't want to watch the news. Quite honest with you, I just don't. But we have to be watchful, and that's really the key. Now, I don't want to get away from what Aldwyn was saying, because you were asking a question about Revelation 6, and I wanted to address that specifically as we close. What was the part you read there, Aldwyn?
Yeah, I'll read it again. So it says, the Lord does not delay his promise, as some understand delay, but is patient with you, not wanting any to perish, but all to come to repentance.
Yeah, I think that's actually from Peter, 2 Peter, if I'm not mistaken. And, that's what I really believe that the book of Revelation is about, is that we will look at and understand, when we see these things come to pass, that we will understand that God's purpose in it is not to hate people, punish people, or, to cause people suffering, but that people would turn to him. Because the reality of the spiritual world, and this is going back to our original premise, is the reality of the spiritual world is there is much more to the spirit than we understand. It's, first of all, it's eternal. The spiritual world is not temporal like the physical world. And the consequences are dire in terms of where we go, our ultimate destiny, and how that works out for every one of us. Here's the reason why I know it's dire. And I'll just close with this in terms of my comments. If God had to send his son out of heaven to suffer and live among us and die at our hands to be raised from the dead so that we could have new life and have a relationship with him and be restored to him, think of how absolutely crucial it must be that we be restored to him.
Yeah.
Because he was willing to do that. That's where I come from is, and I looked to Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion of the Christ, because I already knew how brutal the crucifixion was before seeing that movie, but seeing it was so graphic to understand what Jesus endured on our behalf. I read a story about Jim Caviezel. When they did the scourging scenes, Jim Caviezel, the actor who played Jesus, had a covering, a board to protect his back, right? And at one point, one of the actors got a little overzealous with that scourging that they did, and it came around the side of the board and tore open his side. They had to stitch him up. Yeah, they had to stitch him up. So some of the scenes where you see him really grimacing, that's real. That's him experiencing. He actually got hit by the scourge.
Wow.
And so he had to this day, he has scars from it. But they said that after that scene was cut, he had to go see a hospital because it was too severe for him to be dealt with, on the set. They had to take him to the hospital.
I didn't even know that.
Up.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll just close with that to say that, if God thinks that it's that important that our spiritual destiny has to be dealt with by such a severe thing, that it must be that the spiritual world we go into is far more dire. The consequences of not having a relationship with him are far more dire than we could ever understand. Otherwise, he wouldn't do it. I just don't believe he would. So.
Fascinating. And yes, you're right. It is Peter that wrote that section. I'm reading an article here, and there's bits of it from Revelation and bits from Peter. So that was Peter that said that. So yes, fascinating discussion. And we are talking about the truth about spirituality today on the show, of course. And we've gone down a whole lot of rabbit holes, and it is, it's a minefield for some people when they, start to come into this world and research and look into things. And we always say question everything. And it's interesting as we talk about faith, and letting go. We've been talking about let go and let God is a great saying. Let go and let God, or let go and let flow, or you make plans and God laughs. It's interesting the way that life goes on the different journeys that we go through. My dad always said to me, growing up, he always said, God has a plan for you. God has a plan for you. And I do believe God has a plan for all of us, and sometimes we tap into that and we follow that. And sometimes we are oblivious to it. And some people will just bury their head in the sand no matter what happens in life, and this whole apathy that can happen out there. And that does happen, I think it's important to just send love to people wherever they're at in life, because as we know, hurt people, and healed people heal people. Very, very interesting. And in Think and Grow Rich, in Think and Grow Rich, the famous book, there's 13 principles to think and grow rich. And of course, being rich is not evil. Okay. There is an abundance of wealth out there for everyone. And it talks about this in the Bible as well. Right. And it actually says in there that faith is one of the 13 principles, having faith, and also talks about sixth sense. And sixth sense, I believe, is also trusting your intuition. And I believe when we trust our intuition, it's also connecting us with spirit or spirituality or God or faith. And you know, that I think is absolutely crucial, because the fact is we're not alone on this path, and the powers that be do want to divide and rule, right? That's how they control the masses, is have people living in fear, and they divide and rule. And I think this is where it's very important to respect people's opinions, because most people are just going by what they know to be true. And this is where we encourage you to question everything. Do your own research. We're sharing our truth here, and you may well have a completely different truth, and that's okay, right? So please share with us. Let us know what you know. If you've got any great links that would be good to look at, let's all get educated, get informed, get educated. Let's see what your thoughts are on all of this. Really do appreciate that. So in wrapping up, Ian, any final thoughts on this topic, the truth about spirituality?
I think we've exhausted everything we can exhaust right now.
The one thing I would say is I'd just like to share with your audience that I have written a book on what I call the Jesus Adventure, which is really exploring spirituality from God's view, understanding that he is a life-giving spirit that wants to empower us fully to be everything that he created us to be. And I hope that your audience will check the book out. It comes with a study guide for those who are into really going a little bit deeper. But the book is The Jesus Adventure, The Journey to Spiritual Freedom. If they want to go to my website, they can find the book there. If they are interested in getting it directly from us, we have a lot of other resources. But also, you can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I mean, we're out there online. Certainly check it out. And I would love to hear from anybody in your audience that would read the book and give us their testimonial, their concerns or questions, whatever. I would love to hear your audience actually sending us their thoughts, because we really believe that it's important to share these things, help people understand, and dialogue, because every one of us has a different experience. And part of what I did when I wrote this book was actually interview dozens and dozens of people about each of the topics that I was working through. Unfortunately, my editor and my publisher refused to publish all of the testimonials that I had. They said the book would be too big. So they declined. They said, write another book, write lots of books with the testimonials, but not this one. So, but the point is that it's a book that I think really will help people do their own research and do their own discovery on God's view on spirituality. So that's
wonderful.
That's
wonderful. And for those on the audio, thank you, Ian. Mission 1711 /TJA-landing, LANDING. It's a website to check out. Now, Mission 1711, what does that mean exactly?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So that comes from the book of Acts, where Paul the Apostle was talking about his reception with different groups that he was sharing Jesus with. And he said that the folks in Berea were more noble than those in Thessalonica, because they searched the scriptures daily to see if the things he was teaching were so. In other words, they didn't take it for rote. They did their research. They went out, they went to the Old Testament. They wanted to see, did Jesus really fulfill these prophecies? Is this exactly what the Old Testament prophets said? And so Paul commended them for that, for not just believing his message. So Paul was kind of the first, the first guy to really commend doing your homework and being, a little bit doubtful, right? That's where Acts 17:11, chapter 17, verse 11 is really going. And we just picked up on that as our mission is to really help people have that willingness to test the truth. The truth is out there.
Yeah.
Why do I feel like I just watched a X-File episode or something like that? The truth is out there.
The Jesus Files.
Well, the truth always comes out in the end, right? And we are seeing awakening. Yeah. We are seeing more of the truth. We are seeing more people move into this sort of 5D, world, the spiritual realm, and we're seeing people, rise above. all the BS, I'd say, that's been happening. A lot of BS has been going on in the world, and people are rising above it, which is awesome. Now, do you have a favorite quote or motto that you'd like to share with us today before we go over to Ken?
My motto is I am learning to live the adventure every day, walking with Jesus. That's really what I'm about, what I live for. And sometimes I forget, where I'm going. I'll have those days, and then I remember it's an adventure. I'm just here to live and walk out the adventure. And keeping that perspective, when you run into the hardships of life, you can face it easier because it's part of the adventure. It's okay. It's a bad day. It's not a bad life. It's just part of the walk. So
enjoy the journey. Absolutely.
Enjoy the journey. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. And Ken,
thank you, guys.
Thank you. Ken, how can people connect with you, my friend?
All right. Well, a couple things here. So number one, you can connect with me through www.masteryweightloss.com/connect. And so that is Mastery, MASTERY, weight loss, exactly the way it sounds, .com/connect. And first of all, on the very top of the list, you're going to find a link in there to a mini educational bootcamp series that I have running right now. So in this bootcamp series, I'm giving away my 3 secrets to help you break free from sugar addictions, hunger issues, snacking issues, lose that last 20 pounds finally and keep it off, the emotional eating, all of it. All in 3 short one-on-one sessions with me. You're going to be equipped with an empowered mindset, number 1. Number 2, you're going to be equipped to be able to see past all the industry lies, and I'm speaking of the food industry, and avoid the common pitfalls. Number 3, and lastly, you will be equipped to see past the marketing deceptions that this industry uses. Look, they put it all over their packaging. They make you think that what you're buying is healthy, and you're out there making heartfelt decisions for your family and for your kids, and all you're doing is buying into marketing deceptions. And I help you to finally see past all of that, come out the other end standing on such an empowered ground. You will never look at food the same way again, in a very freeing and a very empowering way, not in a frustration and deprivation way. I can promise you that. So at the top of that connection page, you'll see a link to join my mini boot camp. All right, look, it's been valued at literally $1,500. I am doing that boot camp right now until I raise the price again. So just pay attention to that until I raise the price again. Right now, I'm offering it for $97. The whole thing, all 3 sessions with me, all of it for only $97. You got nothing to lose but those extra pounds. You have everything to gain in the right way. You've got your freedom to gain back. You've got your power with food choices to gain back. You've got all of it to gain back. So you got nothing to lose. So www.masteryweightloss.com/connect. There's 3 other links on that list on how you can connect with me. There's a link to book a free assessment call with me. There's also a link to join my YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. Lots of great content on that. Lastly, there's a link in there to connect with me on Facebook. So those are all the things. Now, as far as my quote, here's the quote that I'm going to give around all of this and what we have talked about today around spirituality and all the things, and then all the things that are going on in the world today, all the trafficking, all the, kid kidnapping and just all of that. Number 1, the Lord is your strength. And he is your shield. In him, put your trust, and you will be helped. That's a paraphrase from Psalms 28, verse 7. And then here's the other one that I wanted to share today. For God gave us a spirit, not of fear. So, the mainstream and all of that, they want to produce fear in you, because that's how they're going to control you. But God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. So that is what I'm going to leave you guys with today.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ken. And for those who want to connect with me, just hop along to linktree/Aldwyn. That's got all my links, linktr.ee/Aldwyn. If you're ready to go next level, be seen, heard, and known this year and make a bigger difference in the world, then as we know, 80% of anything we do is marketing. So that's my game. I've been in the media for 40 years, and I can certainly help you get out there and be seen, heard, and known organically. Okay, we don't do any paid ads. We help you get out there organically. So tomorrow I actually have a free masterclass online. It's called Propel Your Profile in 2025. It's going to be around this time tomorrow. So wherever you are in the world, it's actually going to be 1 till 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Just looking at my clock, it's 2:22 right now. That's got to be a symbolic 2:22. 2:22 p.m. in Gold Coast, Queensland, Australian Eastern Standard Time right now. So 1 to 3 p.m. tomorrow, our time, which will be night time for you guys in the US and other parts of the world potentially. Check out your time zones. Free event. So you'll find that link at the top here of my link tree. You'll also find some free media resources there. You'll find a link to the Global Good News Challenge, which is a free monthly challenge where you can share gratitude and good news and lift the energy on the planet, help to reduce depression and suicide rates. And that's also free marketing for you by doing that every month. And we have actually a 1-day challenge for January. So no excuses, live video, 1 day in January. I challenge you to share on a live video your name, what you do, 3 things you're grateful for, and a piece of good news. Okay, it's very, very simple. So check out the details pinned to the top of the Facebook page, and also my calendar link in there. There's limited times in there, but if you want to have a chat, then you can book that in there as well. All right, there's just some of my links. So check it out, linktree/Aldwyn. You find the link in my bio on socials as well. Now, my quote, I'm actually going to share 2 quotes today. The first one is spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that we are all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us. Inextricably connected to each other. I love that. And this quote here, the more faithfully you listen to the voice within you, the better you hear what is sounding outside of you. Okay, the more faithfully you listen to the voice within you, the better you hear what is sounding outside of you. I want to thank everyone who has joined us here on the live stream. Love is all. Neil, beautiful. Love is all. Love that. Love is all you need. In fact, love is all you need. And I'm going to be sending love to love, God, faith, spirituality. Definitely love is at the heart of it for sure. And with love, when you're in love or have love, you don't have fear. So, coming to a place of love, peace, enlightenment is very, very important. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on Instagram. Some of our latest people who joined us here, Andrea Peebs, Anything is Possible, joined us. Win Hypnotherapy, Rio Tamaj, Michael Ridwan, Allah, welcome. For everyone who's joined us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, thank you so much. On Twitch, X, everywhere else, Spotify. Thank you for joining us, sending you all much love today. Here's to an awesome 2025 moving ahead. Any final words? Ian, thank you for being our guest. Ken, amazing. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It's been a pleasure, and it's been an honor having you on the show today. So
my pleasure, my honor.
Such a powerful conversation.
It's been a great time just getting to know both of you, and really, I'm going to try and catch up with both of your programs there. You guys are both such great, spokesmen for what you're doing. Ken, seeing your story of how you changed your life, with your health and your weight, that's huge. And I mean, everything you've done on this Aldwyn with just, I need to learn what you know, because I'm watching how you're doing this and running this today. And I'm like, I had no idea that you could run all of these platforms the way that you're doing. So it's beautiful. And I totally agree. I've been using social media for some time for work, for a long time. And I think you've got a great handle on it. So beautiful stuff.
Thank you so much. And well, they say it takes a lifetime to be an overnight success. So just stay on the path there, my friends.
And I also have to say this. So I can't take all the credit for how the show runs. Aldwyn is the backbone of all the administrative stuff and all the things that would drive me crazy if I had to do. So she is really the backbone of the Total Truth Show. And so she deserves more of the credit than I do.
I can't wait to tune in some more times. I'm definitely going to be watching the show. So
thank you so much, Ian. Well, we've got 91 other episodes that you can check out. So
I can see that. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, lots of great content. And let's see what we're going to have for our 100th show. I'm looking forward to that one. I might do a multi-panel show. Maybe we'll have a special one there for our 100th show. So stay tuned. Please do like our Facebook page as well, Total Truth Show, and follow us on Spotify, all the places. So let's stay connected, stay awesome. As they say, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So here is standing for more truth, more justice, and more of the Australian and the American way, and sending you much love globally. We'll see you again next time on Total Truth Show. Bye for now. See you.